Yes, welcome in. Badgers getting ready for a trip to Nebraska to take on the Huskers coming up on Saturday, looking to become bowl eligible. This will be their fourth attempt to become bowl eligible. Nebraska is 0-9 in their last 9 games while attempting to get to bowl eligibility. They have not been to a bowl since 2016. This is a battle of heavyweights, a true battle of heavyweights. Both 5-5, exact same situation. Both of them were in last year. Just the games are flipped, right? Like the Wisconsin's at Nebraska this year as opposed to being at home, and then the following game, Wisconsin gets Minnesota at home as opposed to the other way around, and obviously Nebraska will get Iowa. So I want to say I wasn't expecting to be here, but I kind of was expecting to be here a little bit.
I was too. I thought they'd be 5-5 at this point. I think it's just the way they've gotten to 5-5, obviously coming off a Sunday where Luke Fickell fired offensive coordinator Phil Longo. Yeah, not a battle of heavyweights. I detected just a hint of sarcasm in your comment. It is a battle of two completely average teams. On the other hand, I do think on the surface, you'd say 2 5-5 teams, who cares? But it's such an important moment for both programs that have second-year coaches that were brought in to try to elevate the programs that haven't done so. And a win like this, while not going to take them to the college football playoff, at least gives you a little bit of grace to have a bowl opportunity. And it's a 23rd straight year for Wisconsin. That's real important to the players, but they're still 5-5.
They are. But you also have some trash talk between the two. I don't know if it's a little weird. We're going to get into all of it. I mean, there really shouldn't be any trash talk coming from either side at this point, but there is, and we'll get to it and kind of what success looks like for Wisconsin in this game. And then you mentioned the 2 second-year coaches and what they were brought in to do. And I think a nice question that you presented, which coach has a better chance of it happening, and which coach would you rather be right now as they close in here on the end of the year 2 for both of them? We'll get that. There is a quarterback in the portal, not an unexpected one. Wisconsin flipped a 4-star commit from Michigan, certainly getting into that as well. And then we'll finish up with our week 13 picks. Before we do, the camp is sponsored by Home Field Apparel. And they have the best college gear in the game. So much vintage college gear that it's just unlimited. Go up to homefieldapparel.com, search whatever you want. They got a ton of Wisconsin stuff, ton of new Wisconsin stuff here in the last couple of months. And then obviously they're going to have probably some even more new stuff as Black Friday approaches and into the holiday season. But if you use the promo code Bucky24, you can get 15% off your first purchase and also help us out in the meantime. So, all right, let's jump into this. What does success look like for Wisconsin as they travel to Lincoln and looking for another win over the Cornhuskers?
I'll start offensively since that's been the big storyline all week. I think you've got to simplify the game plan. I thought back to the last time Wisconsin had a midseason coaching change when Chris McIntosh fired Paul Chryst just 2 years ago, even if that feels like 20 years ago to some of us, and what they did against Northwestern. Northwestern, terrible team, went 1-11. Wisconsin won that game 42-7, but offensively, they started to unveil some new wrinkles where Graham Mertz, I went back and looked at the story. He completed 7 of 10 passes off play action and had only thrown 9 passes off play action through the first 5 games. And then they unveiled the pistol formation. They ran it 11 times. Graham completed all 9 of his passes out of the pistol, and they hadn't run that one time all season. So I only use that as a comparison because I think this is an opportunity for them to potentially do a couple different things that maybe Luke had wanted to do all along that they now have the opportunity to try at least. But I just think everything must be simplified. Phil Longo had a system. It was his system. He was the only one on the sideline signaling in the plays. And so what can you do to make this easier for a group that has been struggling for the majority of the season?
And how can you get the running game going to help out your quarterback? Because that's been another issue. I thought that they did for the most part last week. They hadn't the 2 weeks prior to that, which obviously put a lot more pressure on Braden Locke. I'm interested also to see what they do to give him a better opportunity. Those are Luke Fickell's words, to be better and more efficient and not have the absolute killer turnover in the absolute worst moment. I think those are again, can 6 days without an offensive coordinator? Because if you think about it, go back to that season, who was calling plays that year?
Well, Bobby Ingram was the first-time play caller, but Paul Chryst obviously had a hand in it, and
Right.
then Paul wasn't calling them when he was gone, and they opened it up and did some different things.
Yeah. So what exactly does it look like with Nate Letton calling the plays and Kenny Guyton signal him in and the huddling sometimes? Like this just feels very, very weird, and I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. But do you have any idea? I mean, I know you're the one that reported it, but I'm just wondering what you think this is going to look like.
Well, I mean, my understanding, obviously, so Nate Letton calls the plays, but Kenny Guyton has a hand in signaling him in. And obviously, those are the two that presumably are shouldering most of the offensive responsibility.
Well, because Nate Letton's going to be up in the press box. Like that's where I believe he's in the press box for games.
Yeah, I think that's right. And
I guess I should check that before.
The huddling thing, I don't know what that would look like, because then you're obviously going away from what you've been to some degree. But a lot of this is going to come down to how can you avoid some of the either miscommunication issues at the line of scrimmage when you're trying to call things very quickly. And I also do wonder if we'll see some people wearing some wristbands this week. Skill position players, wide receivers, just so they can all better be on the same page. But I think when we're talking offensively, what does it look like? Of course, we say this every week, but it has to start with the running game, and they need to be able to put Braden in third and manageable situations. And yes, we can say that every week. But like I said, after the Oregon game, their average down and distance on third down was 8.9 yards, and he completed 1 of 7 passes on third down for 5 yards. So that is obviously the number 1 team in the country, but this is not a bad Nebraska defense. They're a top 20 run defense nationally. So I don't think it's going to be particularly easy. And I would also say this: will we see Cade Yakimelli this week? Because I do wonder about that. He's averaging 8.3 yards per carry, and we haven't seen him since Northwestern.
Do you think that was Longo holding him out?
I know Luke Fickell said that they wanted to shorten the rotation. So maybe, it's a Luke thing. I just wonder, like, if you're going to try some different things.
Like, I totally agree.
Scary.
No, I totally agree that he needs to be a more part of it. Like, I get those questions after every game. I haven't thrown him into the mix because, yes, of course, a guy averaging that and putting that type of number up should be in there. And I don't know how many times I can say it. I think he should be. I will also say, and maybe we talked about this a little bit, I thought Darian Dupree, the last 2 games have been his best 2 games. Mm-hmm. Just the way that he has run with a little bit more pop, a little bit more juice. Like, it just feels like he's feeling himself a little bit and being able to feel more comfortable with what he's seen and what he's looking at and just sticking his nose in and going. So do you want to take that off the field for Cade Yakimelli? Personally, I don't like when we talk about guys that are potentially going to be in the transfer portal. Cade Yakimelli feels like a very, 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 very likely person to do that. So do I want to throw that guy in there and, at the risk of, upsetting a guy who you desperately want to stay and be here in Darian Dupree? I don't think so. But again, those are all the things that Luke Fickell and company have to deal with. I will say, you talk about them being a top 20 run defense in the country. They absolutely are. They were much, much better earlier in the season than they have been of late.
Yes.
Gave up 215 to Indiana, which, again, that's nothing to laugh off. I mean, Indiana obviously they beat him 56-7. So yeah, they were going to put up some yards. Did a really good job against Ohio State. And then the last 2 weeks, 139 to UCLA with, north of 4.5 yards a carry. And then USC had 182 yards last week with 5.7 yards per carry. So it's not like it's impossible to run the ball against them, but they do have their front is some SOBs, man. Those are some tough SOBs. They've got some big boys up front. So I think those guys are it's going to be a challenge. But that's kind of where this, I don't want to say trash talk comes in, but it does a little bit. You had Jake Renfro is not a talk like a guy that just talks a bunch of shit, right? Like that's not who he is. But he did come out and say, we're coming out there to deliver a butt whooping to Nebraska. And I don't know, you heard him say that, correct?
Yeah, I put it in my story, so I'm just going to pull up the quote while you talk so as not to misquote him. So go on.
Yeah, I don't want to. That's what I'm saying. I wanted you to do that because I obviously did not cut it up. But like the fact is, like he was like, yeah, it's a problem for them that we're feeling the way we are right now. It's not about us. It's about them and what we're going to do to them.
Yeah, he said, we're ready for anything, whatever the challenge is going to be. And this week, unfortunately, it's Nebraska for them, not for us. So we're ready to embrace that challenge and bring a beat down to Nebraska. I mean,
feels unnecessary, but go ahead.
Yeah, it's about as PG of a smack talk as you could have, but I don't know, man. If you don't have confidence in yourself, who's going to have confidence? He is by the way, he is super positivity. So, if you're looking for comments about team morale or everything is super great and positive, and that may be true, but they're also 5-5 and just fired the offensive coordinator. So you can't tell me there's at least some level of dysfunction going on.
Yes. However, he wasn't the only one that was talking some trash this week. And I don't even know if this is also on the wasn't really trash talking scale, but Dylan Raiola essentially guaranteed a win. I don't know if you saw this or not. I'm sure you did. You didn't see it. All right. Well, he said that don't worry about, we're going to win next week and we're going to a bowl. And so essentially guaranteeing a win over Wisconsin to get to bowl eligibility and make it happen. Both of these guys are not like coming out and saying they suck, we're going to beat the heck out of them, that type of stuff. But it is on the periphery, it is a little bit of trash talk. And the thing is, when you think about this, it really hasn't been a rivalry, right? Like it hasn't been. I know what you're thinking because you know what I'm thinking. 2019 was Zach Baun and him coming out and saying, can it really be a rivalry when we've never lost that trophy? The ridiculous trophy that Gary Anderson came up with Bo Pelini, the Freedom Trophy, right? The one that sits on the sideline, for hours on end before it's picked up and taken around the stadium.
When I think of freedom, the first thing that comes to mind is a football game between Wisconsin and Nebraska.
Everyone does. Yeah. Look, Nebraska has not beaten Wisconsin since 2012. They've beaten them once since coming in here. Wisconsin has largely, I shouldn't say dominated because some of the games have been close. Obviously, last year went to OT. 2015, Rafael Gaglianone, a couple of game-winning opportunities. He hit the second one. 2016 came right down. Obviously was in overtime as well before the in a game of two really, really good teams. I believe Nebraska was unbeaten still at that point. So there have been some good games in the series, but Wisconsin's ended up on the right side of all of them. But for you, Braden Locke, what does it look like on Saturday? Are you expecting him to be a different player, or are you expecting the same guy?
I don't expect a different player. What I do wonder about is what the run-pass ratio looks like here. I went and looked at his numbers this year. He's averaging a little over 29 throws a game. And I just wonder if that's the path forward here. Now, you want run-pass balance, and if you're going to run enough plays, then maybe it's 35 runs, 29 passes. But you're still going to throw it. I just don't know if you need to throw it 30 times against Nebraska. But that only is a possibility if you can really establish the run. You got to put him in situations to succeed, and that's an obvious thing to say. But what does that look like? Well, if you can't run the ball, you have absolutely no chance. Because if Nebraska's defense can just tee off on them on 3rd and 10, like we saw against Oregon, you're in big trouble. So I don't know if it's some of those quicker, shorter throws. We've seen them try to do some of that, like get Tretch Kekahuna involved where you stretch the field a little bit. But I don't expect a totally different player. He's now started 10 games unless you're going to run something different. And that would be, other than some subtle tweaks, a shock to me.
It's not going to happen. No, I mean it's going to be likely the same offense. I think it's just exactly some of the stuff that maybe Luke Fickell wanted to be done more often, and yeah, I think that probably plays a role here. Last year's game, Tanner Mordecai's feet really helped them, especially late in the game. Braylon Allen carried 22 times for like 62 yards. It wasn't great, but like they tried to run the ball. They still threw the ball 28 times though. So the thing that Braden Locke has to do, and I don't know that we'll see if he's able to do it, is not turn the ball over in the worst possible time, because he has had some pretty good timing on that respect. I guess good timing, bad timing, depending on your side, your side of things. But is he capable of that? Of not making the big mistake at the wrong time?
Yes. I know he got picked on the last drive against Oregon. That was also a desperation situation, backed up in the final seconds.
But it was exactly the type of thing that happens to him though too, right? A tip pass at the line, and yeah, again, the guy made a nice play, but anybody that watches tape, they're not even really, are they even trying to rush the passer at this point? It's just, let's get our hands up and wait for him to try to throw it, because he's Jesse's height.
No, not true. I'm 5'9", man. I couldn't see over that line. He's got a few inches on me, but there was that throw early in the game that frankly should have been picked because it was thrown right to the guy 5 feet from the line of scrimmage. He hasn't shown it this year because he's been picked in every start that he's had, which is why I feel like you've got to limit the number of throws you make so you can run the ball effectively, but we'll see.
That was not an insult for him. If I was to say he was my height, that'd be an insult. I was, that's the difference, obviously. For Wisconsin's defense against Dylan Raiola and that offense, where is the key? And I think the big question is, does Hunter Wohler play?
Mm-hmm.
We have no idea.
Yeah, just so Hunter, for people who don't know, we talk to players every Tuesday night during the week, and throughout this season, they've generally made Braden Locke available to us in a group and Hunter Wohler available to us in a group as two of the leaders of the team. And Hunter was not made available, so that's certainly notable, because there have been certain weeks, for example, like where Will Pauling, you thought he got hurt, but he talked to us during the week. And if that happens, you have a pretty good sense that they're going to play. So I just want to throw that out there. But that is absolutely a big question, given what he can do defensively and the type of leader that he is. For this group overall, I think there's a few different things. Big picture, are they going to suffer a letdown like they did against Iowa? Because they played pretty well against a Penn State team that, had done some good things before that game. And then they go out against Iowa and are not good at all. Give up 329 yards rushing. And you could just see it on the faces of the guys. We talked about this on the Sunday show, but like Jake Chaney and Nazir Forkurine, two defensive players that they made available after the game, that was a tough pill to swallow for them. And in trying to answer questions, because it's like, what more could you have possibly done defensively against a team like that, where you hold them 20 points below their season average? Their quarterback is a Heisman Trophy candidate, doesn't throw a touchdown pass for the first time all season, and you lose the game. You give up 16 points to Oregon. So I think that can be tough for a defense, especially if the offense is struggling here early. Maybe you have that thought of, God, here we go again. But just from an on-field perspective, Nebraska has not been very good at running the ball. They don't have a guy. I don't think they've had a guy who rushed for more than 75 yards at any point all season. And you look at these last 5 games where they're 1-4, and I'll include the win that they had against Rutgers, which was 14-7, right? Did Nebraska win that game, or did Rutgers win that game?
Nebraska won that game 14-7. Nebraska's lost 4 straight since.
Right. So I'll throw in the last 5. They've been bad at running the ball. And Dylan Raiola has not been good either. He was off to a great start. And in this last 5 games, I believe he's got 2 touchdown passes and 8 interceptions. So stop the run, force him to look like a freshman. And he really has looked like that after a hot start. This defense has it in them, but I think there's a lot to be said for where are you at mentally at this point.
I mean, he's having a Braden Locke type stretch here, obviously, right? or no?
Ouch.
I mean,
I mean,
he
yeah.
is.
Statistically, he's got 11 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and Brain's got 9 touchdowns, 9 picks.
He's got a higher rating because he's been completing more passes. He's completing
Yes.
65% of his passes, which obviously is a higher yards per attempt, and that leads to a better rating. But it's not like it's a great rating. He's passer rating of 127.9. I guess 128 if you want to round up. Yeah, 11 touchdowns, 10 interceptions this year.
Yeah, I think this defense has it in them, but big question, as it has been a lot, is does the offense have it in them? Because you could play a really sound defensive game, and we've seen that hasn't been enough.
My question, my biggest thing here is, and I feel like this is what happened against Iowa. Maybe Iowa just rolls anyways, but Wisconsin's defense gets off to a solid start. Everything's going fine. And then you have the catastrophic turnover, and all of your oomph, all of your juice, all of your feelings, all of everything that you got up to play the game are gone. And it goes in the wrong direction, which I think is what happened at Iowa. Again, Iowa was probably going to win that game and do it handily. But after that, they get off the field in the first drive. They give up a missed field goal on the second drive, and then Braden throws the interception on their third drive, and it was all Iowa the rest of the way. So like I feel like maybe there's a little bit of a here we go again potential if that type of stuff happens on Saturday.
Sudden change defense is critical, especially when you're committing as many turnovers as Wisconsin has.
Right. But what I'm saying is, in this environment where the crowd will be against you, and it's just like, God dang it, we're doing this again today. And I think that's a lot of what happened at Iowa. Maybe, again, the defense was really, really bad against Iowa. I'm not going to try and sugarcoat it, but I just think all the momentum and all the good feeling that they had was really tough to overcome because of what happened the previous week. And now you're coming off what happened last week and what you did. And if you're to go in this situation and do the exact same thing, that feels tough. But we'll make our picks coming up here at the end of the show. Let's jump into let's talk a little Wisconsin recruiting, because some good news came in on Wednesday afternoon or Wednesday night. The Badgers flip Michigan commit Jaylen Williams, the 4-star defensive lineman out of Illinois. I know you had a chance to speak with his high school coach and get a feel for exactly who he is and why he decided to do this.
Well, first of all, in a week of many losses, this is a massive win for Wisconsin to be able to flip a guy of this caliber. When I talked to his coach, he said that so they run a 3-4 defense, and he plays on the defensive line. When you watch some of his highlights, you can see the athleticism, the strength. And when he gets to the college level, you're obviously going to have to improve technically, because he is such a big dude that he can just do one move and get by you. But he's tremendously impactful, and he's 6'6", 250. And the thing that's intriguing about him is and this is what his coach said, if a school wanted to put 50 pounds on him so he could be a college defensive lineman, he could be. But Wisconsin is recruiting him as an outside linebacker. And that's really interesting, because at 6'6", Wisconsin does not have a lot of guys like that. Now, Aaron Witt is listed at 6'6". I don't think there's anyone else on the roster who plays outside linebacker that's 6'6", though there are some very big boys. But this guy has, in my mind, a lot more athleticism, and his ability to impact passing lanes and wreak some havoc off the edge is intriguing. In terms of the flip, I feel like this had been coming for a little bit. Like, if you commit to Michigan and you visit other schools, then how committed are you? But this is the 7th 4-star, at least in the 24/7 composite, 7th 4-star prospect they have in the 2025 class. And I'm looking at these two recruiting classes, 2024 and 2025, the two full cycles that Fickell and his staff has had. And I think if Wisconsin is going to elevate itself as a program, to me, this is where it's going to come from. We can talk all we want about transfer portal. You're going to hit home runs maybe on a few of them. And if you hit a home run on a quarterback, that's different. But you have 18 4-star prospects in these two recruiting classes, and I think that's where the difference has to come from. And flipping guys like this is where you can elevate.
Seems like a good pick. All right, so seems like a good addition to this class, and it comes in. I know you said outside linebacker, but just in general, front seven type of body. outside of this past weekend, we haven't seen a ton of pressure on the quarterback. That's desperately what they need, and he feels like a good ad for the Badgers in this class for sure. Yeah, I mean it makes sense, and I know Michigan is recruiting some other guys at that spot, but yeah, as soon as you start taking visits elsewhere, at some point it was going to happen, right?
It would seem that way, yeah. But look, one team's loss is another one's gain, and big question now is there another former Michigan commit that Wisconsin can land in quarterback Carter Smith? But still got a couple weeks on that one.
How you feeling on that one?
It's 50-50 to me. I wonder if the family feels. I mean, obviously, the visit to Wisconsin couldn't have gone much better. They came for the Oregon game; it was absolutely lit. But he's going to go to Florida State, I think, for the Florida State-Florida game, and that's just a few days before the early signing period. So, feels like it's going to go down the wire, and it's a coin flip between those two right now.
Speaking of quarterbacks, Wisconsin has seen at least the first quarterback headed to the portal. That is Cole LaCrue. Not a surprise whatsoever. It just never felt like he was obviously a recruit for Jim Leonhard. Like he committed when Jim Leonhard was the interim coach. And then who did they send down there? Was it the wide receivers coach when Fickell took the job? Who was the quarterback? Who's the guy that ended up at Notre Dame? The coach that ended up at Notre Dame?
Mike Brown.
Mike Brown. I thought that they sent Mike Brown out there to check him out, and they thought they liked him, but his name has just not been brought up whatsoever. He had the injury last year, obviously, and when Phil Longo talked, especially the last couple of months when he would talk to us in those media sessions, where we meet with him once a month, and he was asked about the quarterbacks, Cole LaCrue's name never came up. So, he was talking about Milos, the redshirt or the true freshman walk-on, and he was not talking about Cole LaCrue. So this is not a surprise whatsoever. If Phil Longo had stayed, he still would have been gone. Like there was just no chance. So he's the first quarterback headed to the portal. Not a surprise. How many others end up following him there, in your opinion?
What a great question, and probably the biggest offseason question in terms of player personnel situations. I'll say more than 0.5. I think there's still movement to be had. And really, it's what the Locks decide to do because of their close relationship with Phil Longo, who brought both of them here. Do they fit into the plans of the future offensive coordinator? From Braden's perspective, that'd be real tough because it'd be your third school in a couple of years. But quarterbacks want to go where they can play. And I think we probably both agree that based on what we've seen, it doesn't seem like he's the long-term option here. On the other hand, you've got to get somebody else that's going to be better. And I do think, I don't know, there's a part of me that wouldn't be surprised if Tyler Van Dyke is still here because I think it's his best option. And if you're Wisconsin, why would you say no to that? Like, you want to create competition. If he's your best guy, and he was this year, and he's able to go, it's just that the ACL injury complicates things. But, I mean, that's the quarterback room right now. They've got Braden still in there. They've got Mabry Matire. I think Mabry will still be here. I think he likes it here, and he's unless he ends up playing in both of these games, which I'd be shocked at, he's going to be using a redshirt year, so he'll still have 4 years of eligibility. And so I think you want to see what you can do. But to me, a lot of this comes down to who the offensive coordinator is and whether he's got other people in mind. But I will say this. Fickell has said all along he didn't want to go to the transfer portal again. This strikes me as a year where you might end up having to do that for a third consecutive offseason, depending on what the movement looks like.
Again, this is just what college football is going to be. He can say he doesn't want to go to transfer portal. He's going to have to go to the transfer portal. That's just the way it is. And it's not just quarterback. It's every spot, filling holes, filling gaps that maybe you miss on in recruiting. You can talk about not wanting to be a transfer portal team or a transfer portal program, but I feel like that's everybody now. Absolutely everybody now. That's just the way the college game is. So I don't think it should be looked at as a bad thing. I don't think it should be like, oh, you got wear a scarlet letter, like a T on your jersey because you have more transfers in than anything else. Like it's not a bad thing to have those guys. Are they transferring for reasons? Absolutely. But as we've seen, a lot of guys are transferring up for better opportunities. Elijah Hills is a perfect example, who then was mic'd up for practice this week, and he's been fantastic coming up from Albany. You just wish you would have had more time with him. Like, you wish you would have had another year with him just because of how he's played. There's nothing wrong with the transfer portal.
No,
you can't win. You can't win in college football if you don't have the transfer portal. Now, again, would you like to develop a quarterback? Absolutely, but it's not as easy, or I should say, it's not as easy at this point. Now, maybe that changes. Maybe with some legislation that, especially with how the election played out, that maybe you have a chance to put some more restrictions in place on NIL and the ability to leave and all that stuff. But as it stands, this is the world that you have to live in, and you're going to have to live in it to succeed.
Yeah, the real, I guess, problem is going and getting a 1-year guy. And yeah, they're in the business of winning now, and that's important. And if he can do that for you right away, then great. But if it doesn't work out, then every year you're in the same spot. And so you'd like to develop at least some level of continuity. And that's why getting a portal guy who's young and can have a lot of upward movement is important. But they did that with Braden Locke and Nick Evers, and it didn't work out for Evers. And Braden, while it's only, I mean, he's only a redshirt sophomore, so he's got more years ahead of him. Not seen the growth, at least in terms of on-field results, that you want to see. But overall, the portal, to me, it's been really fascinating these couple of years, because while there is more tape than recruiting out of high school, it still feels like a crapshoot. I would have thought, if I had to pick out of the defensive line, that Brandon Lane would be the guy who ended up starting, and we've barely seen him. That's not to knock Elijah Hills. He's been tremendous. It's just that you don't know when you get these guys, even if there's a ton of film. And maybe that's not a fair comparison because they're FCS guys, but you can say the same thing for FBS level guys. So if you go and get a quarterback and you're going to commit a lot of money to him, you better be right, because you can't afford not to, is kind of where it's at. But absolutely, every year, these guys, and every school other than Clemson is in the business of upgrading its roster through the portal so you can win.
Again, you talk about the 1-year transfer and just throwing them in the mix. Go look at the college football playoff and how many of those teams are led by 1-year guys, right? Notre Dame is, Oregon is, Ohio State is, Miami is, Indiana is, Ole Miss has Jackson Dart, who was a transfer. So like half the schools in the top 12 at this point were transfers, and 5 of them were 1-year transfers. Now, is Wisconsin playing on that same level financially to get the guys that are going to be those impact type of players? That's the difference between them, obviously. But that's not to say that you shouldn't do it, right? Like, you would love to have a multi-year guy, and that has been one thing that Fickell has stood by, is we want is, yes, we're going to bring in some of these transfers, but we want them to have multiple years to use. And those guys have been really good, but you can't just ignore the 1-year guys either, no matter what.
Of course, if you can go get a Cam Ward or somebody on that level, you absolutely do it. And I know they felt real good about what Tyler Van Dyke could offer, not comparing him to Cam Ward in any way, just like someone with a lot of experience that they felt could elevate them right away. And it's also a roll of dice, because you don't know who's going to stay healthy and all that stuff. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's just not an ideal situation to be in, where you keep reloading every year, unless you've got somebody that is a true difference maker. And let's be real about it. How many of those have we seen at Wisconsin at quarterback since Russell Wilson?
We got Joel Stave.
Jack Cohn's the best quarterback. Jack Cohn's the best quarterback they've had since Russell Wilson.
It's not the most winningest, though.
He's not. I mean, Joel, yeah, can't argue with the results, man. I'd like Melvin in the backfield too, but he was clutch. Dude broke his nose and came in and won a bowl game. So what a walk-off.
Well, what an absolute beast. I mean, exactly. Right. All right. So he will not be the only one that moves on. We know that. Cole LaCrue, that is. I don't know what Cole's future looks like. Deacon Hill, praise to the Lord, his arm strength, but he ended up being a starting quarterback for a Big Ten team. No one would have expected that when he left Wisconsin, obviously. He was headed to Fordham, and now he's at Utah State. Who knows what happens with Cole? Maybe a healthy Cole LaCrue finds
Utah Valley.
Whatever. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter at all. Sorry, it doesn't. It's going to be a very sad day when they tear down the McLean Center and they remove the padding where he put dents in during spring practice. It's going to be a very, very sad day for everybody involved. All right, let's get to this. You threw the question at me. Matt Rhule, Luke Fickell, both in year 2, both brought in to rejuvenate programs. One program had not been to a bowl game since 2016. The other one had been relatively successful, but they are both 5-5. They're in the exact same spot that they were at this time in year 1. And the question is, and I'll let you throw your answer at me first, is who would you rather be, Luke Fickell or Matt Rhule?
Yeah, the story that we put up on The Athletic today, and this was myself and our Nebraska writer, Mitch Sherman, was who would you rather be now and in the next 3 years as a program under those two coaches? And it's so close in my mind. I can look at recent history and say, yeah, Nebraska's 0-9 and trying to get bowl eligible in the last 9 games, including 0-8 under Rhule the last 2 years. And yeah, they haven't beaten Wisconsin in the last 12 years, but they've sort of been in the abyss longer than Wisconsin. So I wonder if they're going to come up first. And Matt Rhule has shown that he can turn programs around. I know Luke did it at Cincinnati, but they've got the quarterback. Now, Nebraska fans may say or may be worried that he's not going to be around next year, but you start with the quarterback. I think they've got the infrastructure in place. And as much as I've talked about the recruiting efforts Wisconsin has been able to put together, and they've been great, Nebraska's been able to recruit well. They just haven't turned the talent into production. So I guess I'm inclined after that rambling answer to say Nebraska just because they have Areola, Wisconsin doesn't, and maybe they can put some of the other pieces together because they certainly have the support.
Yeah, it's that's the difference, right? It's like they have the support, but there's also the pressure that goes along with it. There's more pressure on Matt Rhule than there's on Luke Fickell.
Do you think
you disagree? I absolutely do. Wisconsin football is extremely important. It's like your life. It's like how you make your living. So it's extremely important. It's very, very important to me as well. It's very important to a large number of people, and it's vital in their lives. Nebraska, it is everything. It is Wisconsin football is big. The Green Bay Packers dwarf it. That's like the Nebraska program is Green Bay. That is what matters in the state of Nebraska. That is it, the only thing sports-wise. Like anything else can go wrong. If that goes right, they're fine. So that is the only thing that matters over there. It is what everybody talks about 12 months out of the year, and it's very, very it's very full of pressure. Dude, look at the guys that they fired, and look at what they did record-wise. I'm not talking about Mike Riley or Scott Frost. I'm talking about going back to what they did after Tom Osborne left, and just the absolute crap show that it's been since then. You're chasing. They were not cool with 9 wins a season. They were not cool with what Bo Pelini did. And yeah, I think if Wisconsin had the type of success where you're winning 9 and 10 games every year, I don't think they're firing a coach. And that's exactly what Nebraska did.
So I don't disagree with anything that you've said. Nebraska football, to the people of Nebraska, is like the Packers here. Absolutely. I think where I'm coming from is at this stage with where Nebraska is at, it's not about what Tom Osborne did or Bo Pelini did. I think the last 2 hires make a huge difference in this because it failed under Mike Riley in 3 years. They gave Scott Frost, the hometown savior, every opportunity to succeed. It failed in 5 years. They haven't made a bowl game in 8 years. So while expectations are always high at Nebraska, if you want to be realistic about it, they haven't been good in damn near a decade, and they haven't been relevant on a level higher than that in like 10, 15, 20 years. And because of that, I think that there's always pressure on the coach at Nebraska, but where Wisconsin is, they were at a higher level just 5 years ago. And so I think if it gets away from Luke, the pressure mounts in a way that's like, you've gotten away from what Wisconsin was. We tried this experiment. We thought it was going to work and it didn't. And maybe it's because I'm in it every day. You're right. We both are, but there's a part of me that feels like the pressure is somehow greater on Wisconsin than Luke because Wisconsin has been very good more recently than Nebraska, whereas I feel as though there will at least be a measure of patience, maybe more with Matt Rhule, just because it has been an absolute flameout for so long that if you won 9 games a year, that would be hailed as a tremendous success, whereas not long ago it was hailed as what is happening to the program. So that's where I'm coming from in kind of evaluating these two programs and maybe what the pressure looks like.
In this environment, if Fickell were to win 9 games a year, that would be a huge success. In this environment.
Yeah,
In this
absolutely.
environment.
But I'm talking about the comparisons as you were laying out to where people felt Nebraska was, that you're firing Frank Solich for going 9 and 10 wins.
To think that Nebraska fans don't think they're still a blue blood is, I think, is probably a bit of a mistake. They still think that's who they are. They think you disagree?
I can't speak for the Nebraska fan. It's just everything that's ever happened on the field for a decade longer indicates that they're not even close. So if you want to be based in a different universe, then I guess so. I mean, I don't know. That's real tough.
I don't disagree that they're based in a different universe. They're not dealing in reality, but that doesn't mean they don't think it. That doesn't mean they don't think that they have a rightful spot atop the college football world just because they haven't been good for an extended period of time. Like, that doesn't go away with some teams. That doesn't go away with some fan bases. And they absolutely think that they're still a college football blue blood, even though they haven't been. It was kind of like Tennessee. And Tennessee's obviously had a little bit of a bounce back here, but it's the same way. Like, you haven't been good for like a top 10, legit top 10 team consistently for 20 years. But they still think that they do. They still think that they are. They still think it's their birthright to be that. The fact that it hasn't happened doesn't really mean anything to them.
Ultimately, I think both coaches get 4 to 5 years because that's generally what people get. And if you can't turn it around, then there are real problems. And that's kind of where we're at in the landscape, that, it's not like it was in the early 1990s where you can be bad and people have more patience. There's just a lot more riding on it financially and for all these other reasons. So it is an interesting juxtaposition, and part of why I think it is, and why the story was worthwhile this week, is because more and more I'm hearing that Wisconsin is sort of the new Nebraska, in part because maybe they've strayed a little bit from what once worked, but that they are losing their place as a relevant college football program, at least on a national level. And now they're going to play each other for the second straight years, 5-5 teams in a battle for who can be less mediocre.
Yes, they are, which could be less mediocre. Yeah. Look, Luke Fickell has pressure on him. There's no doubt about that. And I think he's feeling it. I think that the press conference we saw this week is evidence of that. There's no doubt. He's under pressure. I just think it's just a little bit, just a tick more on Matt Rhule because of the spot that he's at, because the unrealistic expectations that are Nebraska football and Nebraska football fans for the most part. I think it's not as much about, can he do it or can he do it? It's just where fans are coming from. I think that there are a lot more realistic fans, even though, there's certainly unrealistic at times, but I think there's a ton more realistic fans in the Wisconsin fan base and what is capable, or what Wisconsin's capable of, than maybe certainly what Nebraska thinks they should be. Like, nobody at Wisconsin thinks they're a blue blood. No one thinks no one expects that. Do you think there's people that expect that? Do you expect there's people out there that expect them? I'm talking about like a number of people that expect them to be a top 10 team every single year. That's what Nebraska fans are expecting when you are historically, that's who you are. That's who they think they should be.
Yeah, no, nobody thinks that about Wisconsin. Here's one last thing I would say just about where both programs are at. If Nebraska goes to a bowl game this year, in my mind, it's viewed as a successful season. If Wisconsin goes to a bowl game this year as 6-6, it is a failure. And that says a lot about where both programs has been. Again, Nebraska hasn't been to a bowl game in 8 years. Wisconsin's gone for the last 22 years. But I think that's kind of part of the larger point that I'm making about where things stand with both programs. And it's just because of what successes look like for both programs since Tom Osborne stopped coaching the Cornhuskers.
I mean, yeah, look, Callahan and Obviously, the guy who took over for Osborne, whose name is I'm now blanking on. His long-term assistant that took over and wasn't good enough, so he ended up going to Ohio.
Frank
But like,
Solich.
thank you, Frank Solich and Callahan, and then Bo Pelini. Like, they all, Callahan not so much, but the other two, they had success.
Mm-hmm.
Like 9, 10, like they had Wisconsin level of success.
Yeah, but they were used to something more before that, and that was the problem for Nebraska. And they ain't used to that now because it hasn't happened in a while. So,
but what they're used to, like people, like just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean they don't expect it to get back to there. Like, their expectations of what the program should be are unrealistic and very, very high. Not saying that they think it should be that way right now, but that's where it should be eventually because that's who they were. No one at Wisconsin's thinking that's where it should be every single year. But irrelevant. They both have a ton of pressure on them. Luke Fickell is feeling it. I definitely think he's feeling it. And, financially, and the money that they've spent on him certainly, I think, ratchets up even more the pressure on him that he's feeling. So we'll see. All right, let's jump into our picks for the week. What do we got here? Let's see. It was a tough week. We both struggled. I went 2-5. You went 3-4. You are now back ahead by a game in our standings here. But let's start with BYU, 14th ranked team in the country, who lost to Kansas. Can't believe you let me talk myself out of that one last week. I was talking myself into it, and then you talked myself out, and then you were like, really? Are you really doing this? Either way, BYU at Arizona State. The Sun Devils, the 21st ranked team in the country, is a 3-point favorite there.
See, maybe this is why you need to pick first, so I can't talk you out of anything.
If you want me to go first this week, I will.
Yeah, why not? Let's mix it up.
Yeah. All right. So BYU traveling to Arizona State. I'm going to take Arizona State.
Okay, I'm going BYU. I know they laid an egg against Kansas and barely beat Utah. I like 3 points to work with. Give me the BYU. Yeah.
All right. Army still unbeaten, heading to Notre Dame, take on the 6th ranked Fighting Irish. Fighting Irish, 15-point favorites. The last time we did this, we're like, there's no, like, when this, I believe it was Navy, and it was just like, yeah, they'll be fine. They'll go in there. Notre Dame absolutely smacked the heck out of them.
Yes. I believe it was 51-14. Obviously, Army is better football team right now, but Notre Dame sucked against Northern Illinois, and they haven't lost since. I feel like they've got it together, and they're on a roll. And even though 15 is a massive number, I'm picking the Irish.
I thought we were doing my picks first, but okay.
I'm just too used to it.
Yeah. I'm going to go, I guess I'll go Notre Dame as well here. Ole Miss on the road at Florida. Ole Miss, a 10.5-point favorite. The reason I threw this game in is I think it's an interesting one. Like, Florida's been frisky. I think frisky would be the word. The last couple of weeks, obviously got blown out at Texas when they didn't have DJ Legway, but they've been frisky. They beat a LSU team that was ranked at the time. They gave last week. They gave whoever they played. I'm blanking on it now, but gave them a game. So I'm wondering for you what you want to go second here. So I'm gonna I'll do it. Yeah, I'm gonna take Florida. I think Ole Miss is gonna win, but I think I'm gonna take Florida to cover.
I'll go Ole Miss because I'm not gonna change my pick because of whatever you say.
You think that's what I do, sir?
Sometimes I think you need to catch up.
Oh my goodness! Why would that is? I mean, I think that's hurtful on a number of levels. I don't really know what to say. I kind of feel like we had like a better, relationship to that. I was wrong about LSU was their last game. So yeah, you really shouldn't listen to what I have to say.
I'm almost positive that by like the last week of last season, you just picked whatever I didn't because you were behind, which I guess makes more sense. But just saying,
I was behind significantly. Either way, I'm going Florida at home. Penn State. This is an interesting one. Penn State on the road, an 11.5-point favorite at Minnesota. Minnesota coming off a bye. Their last game was at Rutgers. It didn't go necessarily the way that they wanted to, but at 11.5 on the road, I'm going to take Minnesota at home.
I am as well.
Why are you taking all my picks? Why are you taking all my picks?
But they've been a better team than I thought, and maybe the bye week will help. Not beating Rutgers gives me some pause, but at least Rutgers has a winning record.
Yeah, and it wasn't. I mean, this is not a Fleckian achievement team. Like they've already gotten to 6 wins, so they're not going to have to rely on the APR, which maybe Wisconsin might. Purdue at Michigan State. The Spartans are 13.5-point favorites. I threw this game in there because this is Purdue's last chance at a win this year. In Big Ten play, they had one non-conference win, but this is the only chance that they have to win a Big Ten game, and because they play Indiana in the last week of the season, they're not going to beat Indiana, but Michigan State on the road. This is 13.5. Yeah.
What do you got?
I'm going to take Michigan State. Like Michigan State's 4-6. They're not any good. Purdue may be the worst Power 4 team in the country.
Purdue is terrible. I know they just played Ohio State and Penn State. I think they lost by a combined score of 1,006,000 to 8.
I think that's accurate.
Michigan State's not a good team. They've lost 3 in a row. On the other hand, Purdue is horrible. So I've got to go Michigan State on this one.
Michigan State fighting for bowl eligibility as well. They need to win their last 2 to get in. So we'll see. Or I guess maybe they'll get the Fleckian and get the APR if they get to 5, but they could also be having to face Wisconsin in that mix. So Indiana, the big one, Indiana on the road at Ohio State. Everyone's been waiting for this one to see if Indiana's legit or not. Ohio State, a 13.5-point favorite. They have, it feels like the last couple of weeks they've started to find themselves and settle in after that. Not a great game against Nebraska. I'm going to take Ohio State at home.
Give me Indiana. I think the Hoosiers are for real. They obviously don't have to win with 13.5 points to play with, but I think that they're going to surprise some people.
If they don't win this game, should they still be in the playoff?
Yep.
As a one-loss team? Yep. Despite not having beaten anybody.
It's the Big Ten. Not their fault.
I mean, it is their fault. They bailed out of a game against Louisville and replaced it with something else. So their non-conference schedule was absolute dog crap. Like it definitely is their fault that they did that. And that wasn't Kurt Schinetti. I don't believe it was his choice to do that. So it's not on him, but like they bailed out of that game.
If they're 5th right now and they lose to the number 2 team in the country, them falling to 13 would be surprising to me. If they then come back and win the next game and they go 11-1 in the regular season.
Again, it's just, we're giving credit for wins as opposed to like, what's the point of ever scheduling a tough out of conference game? And it's not their fault that Michigan isn't any good this year. It's not their fault that Washington isn't any good this year. Both teams that were in the national championship game last year are not very good this season. That is not their fault. Their non-conference schedule is, of course. And next year's not any better, but hopefully their conference schedule is a little bit more difficult. But this is an opportunity, huge opportunity. This reminds me of not exactly, but when they were on the come up under Tom Allen in 2020, they went to Ohio State and gave Ohio State absolutely every bit that they could handle with Michael Penix as quarterback and ended up losing that game. But this is another opportunity for that type of win. But I'm going to take Ohio State. Wisconsin on the road at Nebraska. The Cornhuskers are 2.5-point favorites. This is the first time, Jesse, Wisconsin's been an underdog to Nebraska since the Big Ten title game in 2012. They won that one 70-31.
So who you got?
Well, I have some more stats that I want to throw out at you here.
Okay.
Wisconsin 11-1 versus Nebraska, has been an underdog just twice. The title game and then the game at Nebraska in 2012. Obviously, they lost that one 30-27. Nebraska 0-9 when trying to clinch bowl eligibility. Haven't been since 2016. Wisconsin, an underdog for a 7th time this year. That's the most in a single season since 1991 when they were an underdog 8 times. The closest to this, Jesse, like they were 6 times in 1997, but 2008 was 5. Like this is, yeah, it says something about the schedule. But they've also been underdogs to Iowa and to Nebraska. And so, yeah, I mean, and Rutgers. So like it's not just the schedule. It's how Wisconsin has played. Going on the road to Nebraska, I am on the train that you have to prove that you can win before I'm going to pick you. And so in this situation, it's, hey, Nebraska, you got to beat Wisconsin first. And they have not yet done it. So I'm going to take Wisconsin.
At some point, this streak is going to end that Nebraska hasn't beaten Wisconsin in 12 years. And I don't think that is this year. As much as both teams are dysfunctional right now with new offensive coordinators, I think there's something to be said for getting a lift from something new and different, even if it didn't work at Nebraska under Dana Holgorsen. I just think Wisconsin goes in there and figures out a way to get it done in what I think is going to be a close game. But yeah, even though they're 2.5-point underdogs, I think they win this outright because I can't trust either team, but I trust Nebraska less.
Yeah, Wisconsin's won. I think it's 10 straight in this series.
I think that sounds about right.
Because they're 11-1 since Nebraska came back in, and obviously that 2011 game is one they won. They lost the 2012 game, and they've won every one since. So we shall see. It should be an interesting one. Jesse, are you gonna get some? What is it, Runza?
Runza? I've thought about it. I did the first time I went, chose not to the second. Maybe it'll be better the third time. Some people do say the third time's the charm.
All right. Well, we'll be back afterwards to talk about it and look ahead to Black Friday with Minnesota coming to town. Jesse, thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.
All right. There he is. Jesse Temple from The Athletic. You've been listening to The Camp.